Johnny Depp's life was never what the media told you. Behind the scandals, lawsuits, and blockbusters hides a shocking story even most fans don't fully know. From secret hospital visits to $650 million lost, we uncovered it all. If you're a true fan, this is Johnny Depp's full life story like you've never seen before. Johnny Depp's life was never designed for Hollywood. In fact, the original plan had nothing to do with movies at all. Born in Kentucky, constantly moving across more than 20 homes during his childhood, Depp lived in a state of permanent instability. But when he turned 12, everything changed with one simple gift: a guitar. And from the second his fingers touched those strings, something inside him locked in. The noise of a chaotic home life faded behind the amplifier. Music became his obsession, but here's where it gets even more insane. By 16, Depp made a decision that would terrify most teenagers. He dropped out of high school entirely. There were no backup plans, no safety net, just a single idea: become a rock star. And the moment he walked out those school doors, his entire life pivoted toward risk. He formed his first band, Flame, which later evolved into The Kids. And unlike countless teenage garage bands, The Kids were getting serious gigs. They weren't opening at local bowling alleys. They were opening for Iggy Pop, Duran Duran, the B-52s. The real deal. But with every stage performance came a darker reality creeping behind the scenes. The gigs weren't paying enough to cover basic survival. Therefore, Depp, the rising rock musician, found himself selling pens door to door for a humiliating $30 a week. The man who would later earn $75 million a year, he started off literally begging strangers to buy office supplies. And yet, while Depp was grinding through LA's gutters, fate was quietly circling closer. One night, a friend's introduction would trigger the wildest career shift imaginable: Nicolas Cage. Cage noticed something raw about Depp. Something strange. He told him flat out, "You need to act." Depp hesitated. He had zero acting experience, no formal training, no industry contacts. But sometimes the most dangerous risks are the ones you never meant to take. That's how Johnny Depp stumbled into an audition for A Nightmare on Elm Street. Wes Craven wasn't fully convinced, but as fate would have it, Craven's daughter flipped through the audition photos, pointed directly at Depp, and uttered 6 words that rewired his entire existence. "He's beautiful, cast him," that one. And with that single moment, the struggling pen salesman was yanked straight into Hollywood's fast lane, but landing his first role was only the beginning. What happened after his breakthrough would nearly destroy everything he built, because once Depp became famous, he immediately started trying to escape it. Johnny Depp didn't chase Hollywood. Hollywood chased him, and when A Nightmare on Elm Street cracked open the door, television kicked it wide open. Depp was offered a lead role in 21 Jump Street, a brand new police drama built to capture teenage audiences. At first it sounded harmless, but once the show aired, everything spiraled out of control. Almost overnight, Johnny Depp became every teenage girl's fantasy. Posters, magazine covers, fan mail, it came like a tidal wave. But here's the truth nobody saw behind the screaming fans. Depp absolutely hated it. He didn't want to be a poster boy. He didn't want the glossy interviews, the red carpets, or the teen idol label that Hollywood glued to him. As Depp would later describe it himself, fame feels like being hunted. The more famous he got, the more trapped he felt. And here's where his silent rebellion really began. While the world celebrated his rise, Depp quietly started sabotaging his own stardom. He began selecting stranger, riskier roles Hollywood never wanted him to take. He avoided every obvious blockbuster and instead pursued characters that were misfits, loners, or deeply damaged. He was determined to escape the heartthrob cage they tried to build around him, but that wasn't even his boldest move. One night, walking past a massive billboard promoting 21 Jump Street, Depp couldn't stand the image staring back at him. Without hesitation, he climbed up and started spray painting over his own face. A security guard caught him mid-vandalism, but let him finish after realizing it was Depp himself defacing the ad. But the irony? That act of rebellion only made him more fascinating. The media couldn't get enough. Fans loved his bad boy image even more. The very system he was trying to fight against started feeding off his resistance. And while Hollywood kept calling, Depp's obsession with the outsiders, the misunderstood, the freaks, the misfits, only grew stronger. But what nobody he realized was how far Depp would eventually go to fully break out of the Hollywood machine, because the next director he met would unlock the version of Johnny Depp the world never saw coming, and it would forever redefine his career. Hollywood wanted Johnny Depp to be safe. Tim Burton wanted him to be dangerous. Their meeting wasn't just a career moment, it was the collision of two outcasts who recognized the same strange darkness in each other. Depp had been fighting Hollywood's pretty boy machine. Burton offered him the exact opposite, a playground where broken, misunderstood characters could finally exist. Their first collaboration was Edward Scissorhands, and what Depp poured into Edward wasn't just acting, it was his own reflection. Edward, with his blades for hands, was isolated, feared, and silently desperate to be understood. For Depp, it wasn't just a role, it was therapy. He later confessed that much of Edward came from his own loneliness, childhood instability, and struggle with fame. But this was only the beginning of what would become one of the strangest and most successful creative partnerships in Hollywood history. Together, Depp and Burton built a cinematic world unlike anything else. They followed Edward Scissorhands with Sleepy Hollow, Ed Wood, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Corpse Bride, Alice in Wonderland, Sweeney Todd, and Dark Shadows. Each film pushed Depp deeper into the bizarre and further away from Hollywood's standard leading man image. But here's where it gets even more personal. Burton didn't just give Depp eccentric characters, he gave him safety, a place where his weirdness wasn't judged, where his fears, anxieties, and insecurities could live inside the characters he played. Depp once wrote, "Burton rescued me from becoming another piece of Hollywood meat." But even these roles weren't enough to fully heal the cracks inside him, because while the world admired Depp's fearlessness, many missed the truth. Each character allowed him to exercise pieces of his darker pain. His performances weren't calculated, they were confessions. Every weird costume, every bizarre accent, every offbeat movement, it all came from real fractures beneath the surface. And yet, the deeper Depp fell into these dark roles, the more Hollywood couldn't look away. But behind the makeup and twisted characters, something far more chaotic was brewing off screen, a storm that even Burton's safe world couldn't contain. Because as Depp's career soared, his private life was quietly unraveling into a web of heartbreak, addiction, and betrayals no one saw coming. When Johnny Depp signed on for Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl, Disney expected a safe, swashbuckling hero. What they got instead terrified them. Depp didn't want to play Captain Jack Sparrow like every other action star. He wanted chaos, so he pulled inspiration from two bizarre places, Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones and the cartoon skunk, Pepe Le Pew. The result? A staggering, slurring, hand-fluttering pirate unlike anything Disney had ever imagined. But here's where it almost cost him everything. As filming began, Disney executives panicked. Michael Eisner, then CEO of Disney, couldn't make sense of Depp's performance. Some feared audiences would think Sparrow was drunk, mentally unstable, or worse. Behind closed doors, Eisner even threatened to fire him entirely. But Depp refused to back down. He stood his ground and famously told Disney, "Either trust me or fire me." The studio was trapped. Firing him would sink the production. Keeping him was a massive gamble. But what happened next shocked everyone. Pirates of the Caribbean exploded into a global phenomenon. Depp's wild, offbeat performance didn't confuse audiences. It captivated them. He wasn't just playing Jack Sparrow, he became Jack Sparrow. His risk paid off with an Oscar nomination, hundreds of millions at the box office, and a global cult following that made Captain Jack one of cinema's most iconic characters. And yet, even as the world laughed with Sparrow, Depp himself was quietly drowning behind the scenes. Because while the pirate grinned, the man behind him was carrying personal wounds nobody could see. This was the height of his fame, but also the start of his collapse. As the Pirates franchise ballooned into a multi-billion-dollar empire, Depp's personal life grew darker. The pressures of fame collided with a storm of addictions, legal troubles, and emotional chaos that would haunt him for years. But what came next would drag his private demons directly into the public eye and ignite one of the most brutal personal wars Hollywood had ever witnessed. At the peak of Johnny Depp's global success, a nightmare hit him that no movie could ever prepare him for. Because this time, it wasn't him who was in danger. It was his daughter. In 2007, while Depp was filming Sweeney Todd in London, his daughter Lily Rose, just 7 years old at the time, suddenly collapsed. The diagnosis was terrifying. E. coli-induced kidney failure. Her condition deteriorated fast. Doctors weren't sure she'd survive. For days, Depp sat helpless at her hospital bedside, watching life slip in and out of his little girl. But here's where his real character showed up. When Great Ormond Street Hospital managed to save Lily Rose's life, Depp didn't just say thank you, he acted. Quietly, without fanfare, he donated $2 million to the hospital that had saved his child. But the gratitude didn't stop there, because something inside Depp shifted permanently. From that moment on, he began making secret visits to children's hospitals. Dressed head to toe as Captain Jack Sparrow, he didn't bring cameras, no press releases, just him slipping into hospital rooms to make sick kids laugh, giving them a piece of magic they desperately needed. And there's one moment few people know about. In 2008, Depp received a letter from the parents of a 17-year-old British girl who had been in a coma for 5 months. She was his biggest fan. They asked if Depp could record a message, something to give her hope. Depp didn't hesitate. He recorded a personal message as Jack Sparrow, sending words of encouragement directly to the comatose teenager. Her parents played the recording every single day, praying it might somehow bring her back. When later asked about these moments, Depp said words that reveal the entire core of who he really is. "My kids saved my life. Everything else means nothing." But even as he poured love into others, darkness kept finding him, because while one personal tragedy was narrowly avoided, more storms continued circling around his life. From financial battles to legal wars, betrayals, and one headline that would turn his private life into global courtroom theater. And that public collapse was about to hit with full force. Fame didn't just make Johnny Depp rich, it pulled him into one of Hollywood's strangest underground circles. By 2015, Depp wasn't only known as an actor, he had fully embraced his original passion, music. But this time, the stage was far bigger. He formed the Hollywood Vampires with rock legends Alice Cooper and Joe Perry, a band built as much on grief as on guitars. The band's name wasn't random. It was a tribute to a secret drinking club from the 1970s that included icons like Ringo Starr and Keith Moon. But for Depp, it symbolized something even darker, the ghosts of his lost friends. Because many of Depp's closest friendships ended in tragedy. His bond with writer Hunter S. Thompson went far beyond fear and loathing in Las Vegas. When Thompson passed, Depp didn't simply attend the funeral. He fulfilled Thompson's bizarre final wish. Depp personally paid to have Thompson's ashes blasted out of a 150-foot cannon. But that wasn't the only loss haunting him. When Heath Ledger died during the filming of the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, Depp, along with Jude Law and Colin Farrell, stepped in to finish Ledger's role. But Depp went even further, donating his entire salary to Heath's daughter, Matilda. But here's where his obsessions went even deeper. On his private island in the Bahamas, Depp named beaches after the people who shaped his life: Vanessa Paradis, Lily Rose, Jack, Hunter Thompson, Marlon Brando, and a small bay simply called Heath's Place. Each name was a permanent shrine to someone he couldn't let go of. And while his friendships became legendary, they came with a price. Depp was loyal, now often to a fault. He formed intense, complicated bonds with icons like Marlon Brando, Christopher Lee, and Hunter Thompson. But these relationships, filled with lavish spending, eccentric promises, and wild emotional entanglements, drained him financially and emotionally. Depp himself once described his life with a brutal honesty few celebrities ever admit. "I'm the jester of cinema, the method clown." But while he played the fool on screen, his real-life circus was spinning wildly out of control, and the next chapter would expose the full extent of his financial collapse, where millions vanished, lawsuits exploded, and Depp's empire nearly crumbled. At the height of his career, Johnny Depp stood on top of a financial empire few actors ever touch. His net worth once reached a staggering $650 million. But behind the yachts, private islands, and red carpets, an invisible disaster was quietly building. Depp's spending habits weren't wild, they were legendary. He wasn't just buying mansions, he bought 14 separate properties, totaling over $75 million. He didn't just drink wine, he was spending $30,000 a month. Though Depp himself joked, "That's insulting. I spent far more than that." And it gets even more absurd. When Hunter S. Thompson passed, Depp spent over $5 million to fire his ashes out of a custom-built 150-foot cannon, fulfilling his late friend's final wish. Because for Depp, loyalty always came at any cost. But here's where the fortune started bleeding out. In 2016, Depp filed a $25 million lawsuit against his longtime managers at TMG, the management group, accusing them of stealing, mismanaging, and secretly draining his money. But TMG fired back with brutal receipts, revealing Depp's own extreme spending: private jets, rare collectibles, massive staff salaries, and bizarre impulse buys that shocked even industry insiders. The lawsuits opened the floodgates. Suddenly, the private world Depp fought so hard to protect was dissected in public court filings. filings. Fans saw itemized lists of purchases that didn't just feel excessive, but they felt surreal. And yet, Depp stood firm. He claimed he never cared about money. Fame had already suffocated him. Wealth was simply a byproduct. As he bluntly put it during the trial, "I have never needed money. I just like buying things." But the real storm hadn't even hit yet. While the financial lawsuits dragged on, a much more explosive battle was quietly forming behind the scenes. One that would eclipse every scandal he'd ever faced. Because just as his empire was financially crumbling, Depp's personal life was about to detonate into the most vicious public trial of the decade. For years, Johnny Depp's personal chaos had stayed behind closed doors. But in 2015, he married Amber Heard, and everything spilled into the world. At first, their relationship seemed like Hollywood's next power couple. Red carpets, magazine spreads, and glamorous appearances. But behind the smiles, something far darker was brewing. Just 15 months into the marriage, Heard filed for divorce. And that's when the accusations began. Allegations of physical abuse, restraining orders, photos of bruises. The world watched as headlines exploded. But here's where things became dangerously one-sided. In 2016, the Me Too movement was at its peak. Depp's name became synonymous with abuser in countless media outlets. Studios panicked. Disney distanced itself from Pirates of the Caribbean. Warner Brothers quietly severed ties with Fantastic Beasts. Hollywood had turned its back on one of its most bankable stars. But Depp didn't stay silent. He fiercely denied every allegation, stating, "I never struck Ms. Heard." And then came the trial that changed everything. In 2022, Depp sued Heard for defamation. And for the first time, both sides were forced to expose everything under oath. Secret recordings surfaced, texts were revealed. Amber's credibility started unraveling live on global television. The world saw a very different story. Recordings captured Heard admitting, "Tell the world, Johnny. Tell them I, Johnny Depp, am a victim of domestic abuse. See if they believe you." But the world did believe him. The jury awarded Depp $15 million in damages, declaring Heard's claims defamatory and malicious. Fans across the globe celebrated. Depp's reputation was vindicated, but victory came at a price no one could see. Because behind the courtroom win was a man who had lost nearly a decade of his life. Financially wrecked, emotionally shattered, and professionally blacklisted for years. And while fans cheered, Depp quietly faced the most painful truth. Some damage can't be undone, even with a public victory. But his fight wasn't over yet, because now, after surviving scandal after scandal, Depp was preparing for the one thing Hollywood never expected: a shocking, quiet reinvention. For all the fame, money, and chaos surrounding Johnny Depp's life, his deepest identity was always written in his blood, not his headlines. Depp's family tree isn't just complex, it's a mosaic of history itself. His ancestry traces back to English, Irish, French, Scottish, Dutch, Cherokee, Creek, and even African roots. But buried within that lineage lies one of the most remarkable stories few fans ever knew. Depp descends from Elizabeth Key, the first biracial woman in America to legally win her freedom from slavery. In 1656, Key sued for her freedom in colonial Virginia, a moment that changed not only her life, but set legal precedent for generations to come. It's a piece of American history Depp rarely speaks of, but it lives inside his DNA, and his connection to Native American heritage runs even deeper. Though his claims of Cherokee and Creek ancestry remain debated, in 2012, Depp was symbolically adopted into the Comanche Nation by LaDonna Harris, making him an honorary family member. But it wasn't about status, it was about identity. However, no legacy means more to Depp than the one he's built with his own children. Throughout all the scandals and lawsuits, Depp has been fiercely protective of his kids, Lily Rose and Jack. He's publicly forbidden paparazzi from photographing them, stating, "They never asked for this life. I won't let the world consume them." And he's literally carved that devotion into his skin. On his arm, a sparrow flies toward him, symbolizing his son Jack. The name Lily Rose is etched near his heart. A heart-shaped tattoo bears his mother's name, Betty Sue. And perhaps most poetically, Depp once said, "My body is my journal, my tattoos are my story." Because while Hollywood gave him everything, only his children gave him peace. But even as he tries to retreat into family, one final chapter still looms. A rare glimpse at the man Hollywood still doesn't fully understand. And in the final chapter, everything comes full circle. After decades of scandals, lawsuits, betrayals, and comebacks, Johnny Depp remains Hollywood's unsolvable riddle. Most actors either fade or fall in line. But Depp, he's has chosen neither. Today, he splits his life across 3 worlds: a vineyard estate in France, a private island in the Bahamas, and his home in Los Angeles. The Bahamas island, Little Halls Pond Cay, remains his personal sanctuary, with beaches named after his children, former partner Vanessa Paradis, and lost friends like Hunter S. Thompson and Heath Ledger. Every grain of sand tells part of his private story, but don't mistake this for retirement. Depp still rides his custom Triumph motorcycles, writes music in private studios, and shows up unexpectedly, sometimes where fans least expect him. He's popped up in Paul McCartney's music videos, randomly kisses Jimmy Kimmel during interviews, and even continues his now legendary habit of visiting children's hospitals dressed as Jack Sparrow. Because while Hollywood tried to strip him down to headlines, Depp kept his weird, unpredictable soul intact, and he's brutally honest about it. "I don't pretend to be Captain Weird, I just do what I do." That refusal to conform has defined him since day one, from dropping out of school to sell pens for $30 a week, to risking his career by defying Disney's orders on Pirates of the Caribbean. But here's the part that keeps everyone guessing. Even after losing nearly everything, his fortune, his reputation, his marriage, Depp remains impossible to fully cancel, fully predict, or fully control. Every time the world thinks they've seen his final act, he reappears, reinvented, and more resilient. Because at his core, Depp was never really built for Hollywood. He was built to outlast it. And if you think you've seen all his secrets, trust me, there's always more Depp that nobody's uncovered yet. If you're a true fan, make sure you watch our full breakdown, because this was just the beginning of Johnny Depp's unreal story. And if you think this was wild, wait till you see what we uncovered next. Tap the video on screen and dive even deeper into Johnny Depp's untold life.